So you know everything about JavaScript and React now, right? Great. Go forth and get a senior developer job. So you may wonder where to go from here, because we've kind of alluded to the fact that we've barely scratched the surface of really both JavaScript and React. You've learned a fair amount of JavaScript, but we've still been dealing almost exclusively with ES6 and newer. And there's a lot of JavaScript that uses older syntax. And although we showed you how to use a lot of things, and sometimes we went into detail about how it works, we built things pretty fast and showed you more how to use than how it works. And you may wish to dig a little deeper. Like map takes 3 arguments. We usually only dealt with the first one. I think we dealt with the second one once. We never dealt with the third one. So, you might look that up. So hopefully one thing that you've picked up from this class, because we tried really hard to emphasize it, is how to look stuff up that you don't know, right? Sometimes we pretend we don't know something just so we can go look it up in the docs to show you, hey, here's how you go look it up in the docs. Or we create errors on purpose so we have an excuse to use the dev tools. Sometimes we make mistakes on accident too. Hopefully we're smooth enough that you can't tell the difference. Sometimes I say, oh no, well I say I'll cuss even if it's on purpose. Then they'll never catch on. But we can point you at some specific resources to continue your studies. One major area of React that we didn't touch on is a pattern called Redux. Redux is a totally different way of managing your data from using state. And frankly, with React apps at any significant scale, it is way more likely to be used because this stuff gets unmanageable pretty quickly. It's already gotten a little unmanageable in NoteHerder. Passing props down through like 1 million levels of components, that feels slightly ridiculous, and you might think there has to be a better way, and there is. And one of those ways is Redux. But it was just a little beyond the scope of this class. But that's a thing we definitely encourage you to look up next if you want to keep doing this stuff. And you should keep doing this stuff because if you don't touch React for another year, guess what? You won't remember any of it. So keep working on it. Keep building fun little toy applications or really cool applications that you can sell for $1 billion. Or just remake your personal website. Don't have a personal website? Make one. Make it in React. It's good practice.
There's a Redux meetup coming up soon, I believe.
Monday. It is Monday. Yeah. We might post another link to that in Slack, I guess. We're going. Yeah. It's a React meetup, and there is one of the 2 talks on Monday is about Redux, an intro to Redux. So that might be really cool. LearnRedux.com. Hopefully that's a pretty easy URL to remember. That's by Wes Boss, the guy who did JavaScript 30, which was something that we linked to on the website. Also, JavaScript 30 may have been a little much for you before class started, but I bet you could go back and do it now. You may not know how to do all the projects. What it is it's meant to be done over 30 days, kind of. But it's just 30 little tiny JavaScript projects that you can build in just a few minutes. And it's good practice. And if you don't know how to do them, he, of course, explains how to do them. And it's free. And Learn Redux is free, too. It's a pretty good 20-video tutorial where you build an Instagram clone using React and Redux. And I think an older version of React Router. So try not to get too confused by the fact that it uses an older version of React Router. But
What's the other one besides LearnRedux.com?
Oh, JavaScript 30, which is JavaScript30.com, which doesn't use React or anything. It is all vanilla JavaScript. And it's just 30 very small coding challenges that are neat. Like you build a little clock using just CSS and JS. You build a little drum kit where you hit keys on the keyboard and it makes drum sounds. So they're all kind of fun and neat looking little animation things and stuff like that. And along the way, you learn certain things really well. And good practice on some of the topics that we covered in a slightly different, not doing dynoplasty all the time. Like this, event capture, propagation, bubbling. Like, we alluded to that. And we did things like prevent default. And one time we ran into an issue with propagation where, because we clicked on this icon and not, that was the actual event target, And then we learned about event current target, that kind of stuff. So this lesson will kind of explain a little more why, what that whole propagation and bubbling thing is. You build your own little video playback widget. They're pretty cool projects. So yeah, you might want to check that out. It's all ES6 stuff. You don't know JavaScript? These are pretty short books, and there are online versions right here. They're free, and it goes into a lot more detail about how JavaScript works, about how this and binding and so on works. If you want to learn a little more about that stuff, a little more about asynchronous JavaScript, something that we've had to deal with just a couple of times, but we didn't really get into great detail. Seth has actually read these. I haven't yet, but I want to. And he's just been reading them now. Like this guy already knows JavaScript, right? But he's still reading these books because there's a lot of, knowing how to use something and knowing how it works are kind of two different things. And we still have a lot to learn about that. Seth, you want to say anything else about these?
Yeah, no, honestly, I think at this point, they're probably definitely within your level of stuff you could grasp. And I found these books to be very clear and very helpful in understanding like the basics of how JavaScript is working. So yeah, that's it.
Hey, buddy. And we'll put some other links up there too. Do encourage you to check it out. And remember to review this stuff. Our website for the class is pretty dang thorough, I think. And I don't know, I may have mentioned this yesterday, I can't remember. But on the notes page for any given day, when we have links to the projects at the bottom, we generally link, did I refresh this or did I really not ever update that? I never updated that. Doggone it. Thanks. But we don't just link to that project. We link to the commit where we left off that day. So if you go back to that day and look at the topics we covered and you want to know, okay, so what was the code like at the end of this day? That links directly to that commit. So you can always see that. If you do that and have no idea how to get to the up-to-date version, just click on the name of the repo up here, right? 10. I'm not sure I ever did that yesterday either, though. I don't remember. One other thing I know we're going to link to, and I just can't think of what it is right off the top of my head, but there's a good page on GitHub with just a list, a bunch of links to React and Redux tutorials and documentation and stuff that's really good and really thoroughly commented and stuff like that. And I think I mentioned this yesterday, but reacttraining.com is also really good. Some of these are free and some of them aren't. Reacttraining.com. React Fundamentals. I don't think it takes very long. I think you can do the whole thing in a day. But if you want to refresh the fundamentals, or if there's still some things like, okay, this whole passing props down through a million things, the difference between props and state, I just don't get it. You might find this explanation better, and seeing another project, it's like, okay, enough note herder, I can't even think anymore. Here's a different example. If you sign in and look at that lesson real quick. I've signed up for the free ones. I haven't done either of them, but Seth has done this one, React Fundamentals. So there's one called Data Flow with Props in React. If that part blows your mind, that might be the lesson you want to look at. And there's not that much to it. There's some text explanation, and there's like a 6.5-minute video, and then there's an 8-minute video explaining map and filter a little more thoroughly, which we didn't even use once we got into React very much. We used it once. But also, remember when we ejected yesterday and we looked at that Webpack config and we just totally glossed over it and we don't have to worry about it because Create React App takes care of it for us. Well, in their very first, in this tutorial's setting up your first React component, they have you go ahead and configure Webpack and Babel yourself. At least a very gentle introduction. Notice this is only a half hour long, which may sound like a long time, but a gentle introduction to those things so you can do it all the way from scratch. Not that you'll necessarily need to, but it's really nice to understand that that's what's going on under the hood. So if something breaks, you at least kind of know where it might be breaking. So that's reacttraining.com. And they also have another one of the free ones is specifically on, actually I might find it faster this way. React Router. They have training on React Router. If that was just a little too mind-blowing, and here's the best part. The author of this training wrote React Router. So he's probably not going to lead you astray on that particular topic because he wrote the darn thing.
Is that one up now? Because I know they were just updating the training to React Router 4 when we first started.
Yeah, let's see. Good question. Coming soon. But hey, soon, because React Router 4 is really new. And they just got finished writing this. This is the same person who wrote it. Give them some time. Gosh, you guys. So yeah, soon there will also be free training on React Router up there. But the React Fundamentals one, from what I hear, is very good. Yeah, Rebase. He wrote Rebase. Yep. Questions about any of this stuff, about where to go from here to continue your learning, because you totally should? Groovy? Excited to keep growing? I can tell.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, as an employer and an expert in JavaScript, both of you, do you think it's a good idea to upload or create or do these training projects in a repository on our GitHub as an example of what training we've done, or should we just not do that?
That's kind of exactly what we were supposed to be doing, yeah. Remember how on Fridays we would check your GitHub to look for your projects? Yeah, you were supposed to be doing that the whole time. Sure, yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I thought you meant the stuff we were doing in class, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've completely failed. It's like, hey, you think maybe we should put this stuff on GitHub? I don't know. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good question. I usually do when I do stuff like that. Even if I don't put it on my GitHub, I at least create a Git repository locally. Because for one thing, it's a really easy way for me to retrace my own steps. Like, okay, I remember building this thing. I don't remember really how I did it. So I can retrace it. Plus, if I break stuff, I can get back to a working state. So yeah, I think it's a good idea. And you might, in your README, you can always say, so that it doesn't look like you're taking credit for someone else's work, you can always say that you created this as part of reacttraining.com or whatever. Yeah, not a bad idea. By the way, that's Dave Jones, everybody. That's what the other Dave from Fretless looks like. We're about to have story time, and we're going to talk about Dave Jones a little bit. The legend of Dave Jones. We're going to roast Dave Jones here in a minute. Yeah, Tom.
So what do you think the React will go? Like you said, it would actually change a lot, even from session 1 to session 2 this period of time. So what do you think there will be a fundamental change later on? Like, for example,
Well, who knows? Because we're not Facebook. Angular, from Angular 1 to Angular 2, complete rewrite, throw out everything you ever knew. And that was drastic, and most projects don't do anything quite like that. But Angular did that. And it hasn't really backfired that much, considering. So now Angular 1 and now it's Angular 4, because they went from 2 to 4 in the span of like 6 months. But Angular 4 isn't very different from 2. There's a reason they skipped 3, but we won't go into it, because this isn't an Angular class. But the point is, everything we use will change over time. But thank you for asking that, because that reminds me I was going to talk about how we keep up with stuff to the degree that we do. But no, I'm not expecting React to throw everything out. I know they're working on a pretty major change to some of the internals that shouldn't affect the API. In other words, how we use it. But it'll change. I mean, there was a 15.6.0 that just came out, I think. There's always little small changes, but yeah, what you're referring to, rebase changed like 3 weeks ago. So between the time that I wrote Note Herder before the boot camps began and the time I tried to use it in class, rebase changed. So when I ran, yarn add rebase, it added rebase 3.0, which removed all the authentication stuff. So you may have noticed we used the Firebase API directly to do authentication. That used to be built into rebase. Now it's not. And I got surprised by that in the middle of class and had to figure out live in front of everybody what the changes were. Now, I could have just specified the older version number when I installed it and dealt with it, but I also didn't want to teach something that was deprecated, and it wasn't that hard to adjust. Something even worse happened last year. Firebase itself did a radical change in the middle of boot camp. And Seth had to figure that out on the fly, and I was on vacation. Yeah, I didn't know they had done that. Nobody asked me, because the deal was they had just a few weeks earlier come out with the new version, but the old one still worked. You could still create new versions in the old system. And then as soon as I left on vacation, they were like, completely shut off the old system. It's all new now. All your code just broke. Deal with it, suckers. We're Google. We do what we want. But if you look at the code here, this used to be one of the big advantages of Yarn over NPM. Yarn creates this file as soon as you run install, yarn.lock, which locks in the version numbers that it installed for everything, so that if someone else checks out your code, when they install the packages, they're going to be getting the same versions of the packages that you did, not the latest versions of everything. If you look at package.json, you also specify version numbers in here, but a lot of times you see this, which means, like if I had 2.whatever.whatever in here, that would mean it can install all the way up to 2.9. something. Anything that begins with a 2 would match this rule. But that lock file will have the exact version that we put in. So what this says is any version of rebase in the 3.x range. And if you hover over it, actually Visual Studio Code does something pretty cool. It tells me that 3.0.2 is actually the latest version. Yeah, it really is. Today. Third session, all bets are off. Probably be 4.0, and they'll decide, we don't really want to sync state anymore either. Yeah, so that's that thing. So as far as how on earth do you keep up with this stuff, because it does change a lot. First of all, you can't keep track of everything. Don't drive yourself crazy trying. But there are things you can do. One thing is I do subscribe to several newsletters. JavaScript Weekly. Is it JavaScript Weekly? It must be, yeah. JavaScriptweekly.com is an email newsletter. Free once a week. Email roundup of JavaScript news and articles. The latest issue is here. And, most of the time I don't read this all the way through. But I at least glance at the headlines every single time. So I see something like, NPM 5 is now final, which happened, I believe, the week before boot camp started. And NPM 5 changed some of the basic commands. So I needed to know that because students were just now installing NPM and they were going to get a newer version than I had if I didn't update and rewrite my instructions accordingly. So I at least try to look at the headlines because they're also good. That's how I found a lot of the tutorials that I use too. Because if you look through this enough, you'll see a lot of tutorials that are always marked with this little green tag here. Using source map to debug errors. Test-driven development for JavaScript, that sounds cool. What's coming after ES6, the future of JavaScript? Ooh, might like to watch that. Will Vue.js become a giant like Angular or React? Oh, what's Vue.js? I might want to read up on that. That kind of stuff. Some little tutorials, some examples. And there is also one from these same folks specific to React. Here are their other newsletters, React status. Again, just a weekly newsletter about stuff like React forms using refs to grab values. We did that. Ooh, building a React data grid using Redux and AG Grid. Cool. Using Redux to manage React navigation state. Redux. Dave said I should figure that out. So that's one way to keep up with this stuff without going insane. I mean, it's a way to keep up with this stuff. You may go insane anyway, or you may already be there like me. But also, going to meetups is really helpful. Not only do you hear talks about this stuff, but also, and this is absolutely every bit as important as the talks, is you hang out with other developers. And you get to talking with them. Oh, what are you working on? Oh, I'm working on this thing with this hot new framework called blah, blah, blah. You're like, oh, I should probably look that up. They'll be like, yeah, it's just like React, except the hoopity-doo is in the blah, blah, blah instead of the heapity-g. And you're like, ooh, that's my least favorite thing about React is the heapity-g, so I'm gonna check that out. So, that's a good way to stay on top of things and meet other people who know things that you don't. Talking to other developers is a good way to stay in touch. Stay in touch with each other. Use our Slack channel. I think it's sticking around. And if you're really nice, we won't change our phone numbers, and you can get in touch with us afterward. I'm not sure you're that nice. Okay, we'll ask Evan to leave the room, and then we'll give you our phone numbers. No, I'm just kidding, Evan. Other questions about that stuff? Ready for story time? You have to look that up in the documentation. It's right there in the README.